Is this painting the only piece Vincent van Gogh sold in his lifetime? It's just a landscape painting of a grape harvest in the south of France, so why this piece? We've all heard that Van Gogh wasn't a particularly successful artist during his life, but this being the only work he sold is not completely true. To understand why this belief has persisted over decades, we should go back to the time Van Gogh was alive. He was born in the Netherlands in 1853 to a family that appreciated art. His uncle Cent, short for Vincent, who he was named after, had established himself as a successful art dealer by the time his nephew was 5 years old. And we know that Theo, Vincent's brother, followed in their uncle's footsteps and became a rather known art dealer as well, financially and emotionally supporting Vincent's career as an artist. But Vincent was quite scattered when it came to his career. He didn't know what he wanted to do and changed his path several times, trying his hand at being an art dealer, a school teacher, and a preacher before deciding to commit to being an artist at the age of 27. While he was exposed to the art world since he was a child, he actually had little to no artistic training. In his unfortunately short life, he only spent 10 years of it pursuing his art. So it's not necessarily surprising that during his trial and error years of just painting with the purpose of learning, he did not create remarkably notable pieces. Perhaps this is one of the reasons why the myth of him having sold only one painting is continued to be believed. He was essentially a self-taught artist that only became marketable in the last 2 years of his life, when he moved to the south of France, by which time he had 8 years of practice under his belt. What's also important to know is that the art scene in Paris before Van Gogh even became a painter was quite competitive. The great artists we know and love today had to fight to have their work recognized in the famous Paris Salon, where good art equaled traditional. Monet even tried to commit suicide in the Seine when he was rejected from the French Salon, saying in a letter to his friend, "The fatal rejection has virtually taken the breath out of my mouth. And despite my expertly modest prices, dealers and art lovers are turning backs on me." Luckily, he wasn't successful in his attempt, and mere decades later, the same group of people that rejected him helped establish him as one of the greats. Had it not been for Van Gogh's early passing, perhaps he would have also gained the success Monet did. By the time Vincent was ready to sell his paintings in the 1880s, he was considered to be part of the new generation of artists, the ones that still had to prove themselves with his use of post-impressionist style, a movement that goes beyond Impressionism's attempt at depicting settings using natural colors and the fleeting nature of light, and focuses more on the symbolic depiction of the artist's emotions, shown through bolder choices of colors and heavier, more chaotic brushstrokes. The perfect example of a post-impressionist painting is the Starry Night, Vincent's magnum opus. Unarguably remarkable, the swirls and the vibrancy that has brought fame to this piece is not exactly replicating what Van Gogh saw, but instead what he felt when he closed his eyes after looking at an ordinary scene. During his artistic career, Van Gogh's paintings were observably different than any that was accepted into the mainstream art markets of Paris. He was an unsuccessful artist, yes, in terms of sales, but he wasn't unappreciated. His works were shown at several big exhibitions before his passing, and his peers recognized his talent and at times defended him. At the opening dinner for Le Vin exhibition in Brussels in 1890, where the Red Vineyard was sold, Henri de Greux, a Belgian symbolist painter, criticized Van Gogh's paintings and called him an ignoramus and a charlatan, to which both Henri Lautrec and Paul Signac responded, coming to Van Gogh's defense. Why this painting is commonly believed to be the only one he sold during his life comes down to semantics. There are letters he has written where he speaks about bartering his paintings for food and art supplies, as many young artists do. That's one piece of evidence. At the beginning of his career, Van Gogh received his first commission from another one of his uncles, who was also an art dealer. He ordered 19 cityscapes of The Hague. That's another one. His brother Theo mentioned selling a self-portrait of Vincent's to Sully and Laurie, London art dealers, saying in a letter written in October of 1888, "We have the honor to inform you that we have sent you the 2 pictures you have bought and duly paid for, a landscape by Camille Corot and a self-portrait by V. Van Gogh." This would have been 15 months before the sale of the Red Vineyard and would be a huge piece of evidence against this common belief. However, researchers have discovered anomalies around this sale. Sully and Laurie were not yet partners in 1888, and there's no evidence of a piece by Gogh being sold to Sully in October of 1888. Maybe Theo marked the date wrong, but this mistake makes the sale at most half an evidence. Vincent himself has expressed that he sold a piece to Parisian art dealer and painter Julien Tanguy, and Theo mentioned selling another work to a gallery in London. This would bring the tally up by 2. But what paintings, we don't know. This is why the Red Vineyard still persists to be known as the only painting Vincent sold in his lifetime. Now, is this belief true? The answer is an enthusiastic maybe, but leaning towards no. What we do know is that the Red Vineyard is the only one for which we have authenticated proof. It was sold at an exhibition in Brussels held by Le Vin, a group of 20 Belgian artists. Vincent received an invitation to submit his works for the exhibition that was being held January of 1890, 7 months before his passing. He selected 6 paintings to be displayed, sketching their placement on the back of the invitation as shown here. Ivy was to be the centerpiece, with 2 of the sunflowers on either side. To the side of this triptych, he wanted to place the flowering orchard and the wheat field at sunrise, and the pièce de résistance of it all, the Red Vineyard, was to be hung at the top or underneath the entire arrangement. It was the only painting of Vincent's that was sold at this exhibition, and it was to Anna Bosch, a Belgian artist, founding member of Le Vin, and the sister of Eugene Bosch, Vincent's friend. She bought it for 400 francs, which is about $2,000 today. This piece, painted in the post-impressionist style, was not done on site, but actually was done here, in the Yellow House, Van Gogh Studio. A month prior, Paul Gauguin, an artist Van Gogh looked up to and met 2 years previously, decided to join Vincent in Arles. During their time together, Gauguin was encouraging Van Gogh to paint more freely and not to take things so literally. And so Vincent tried painting this piece from memory as opposed to en plein air. In a letter to Theo, Vincent says about this painting, "I'm going to set myself to work often from memory, and the canvases done from memory are always less awkward and have a more artistic look than the studies from nature, especially when I'm working in mistral conditions." He came across this vineyard when he was taking a late afternoon walk with Gauguin in late October, a month before actually painting it. The grape harvest in Provence usually takes place in September and must have been late this year. He was bewitched by the charm and the colors of this scene. This dramatic landscape is cloaked in saturated tones. The autumnal red and yellows contrast the workers' blue attires. Our eyes move slowly from the field onto the horizon, where the setting of the sun is captured. The warm yellow light of the sun occupies the sky and pours in between every blade of grass on the field, providing light to the workers whose day is nearing the end. Vincent has painted this scene with a diagonal line in mind to guide our gaze. From the field to the sky and bringing them to rest on the glistening road, captured after a strong rainfall, almost resembling a river. Recently, the Pushkin Museum, where this painting is hung, decided to conserve the picture, and so this led to its first investigation using modern scientific techniques. They found that part of this section was created from paint that was squeezed directly onto the canvas, and Vincent used his fingers to smooth it out rather than using a brush. The examination also shows that the sky has lost some of its color. Van Gogh used yellow paint, which tends to darken with exposure to light, and so if we had the chance to see this painting upon its conception, the yellows would be much brighter, almost glowing onto our skin. The original version had a woman standing in the road here, dressed in a skirt, a blouse, and a hat, before Vincent decided to change this subject to a man. This woman, bending over in the center, was also added in later. When Vincent found about the sale of the Red Vineyard, he wrote to his mother saying, "Theo informed me that they'd sold one of my paintings in Brussels for 400 francs. In comparison with other prices, including the Dutch ones, this isn't much, but that's why I try to be productive in order to be able to keep working at reasonable prices. And if we have to try to earn our living with our hands, I have an awful lot of expenses to make up for." So the Red Vineyard wasn't the only one of his paintings with a buyer. It's important that we know this so that we don't equate his legacy with his sales. What he did better than anyone else at the time was that he tried. Different careers, different cities, different artistic styles. And that's why we all feel a connection to his paintings today. We can sense that everything he painted, he did it with pure honesty, never sacrificing his art for success. He made ordinary scenes that mesmerize us all. When he's the creator, everything looks better in his vision. Thank you so much for watching. If you're interested in supporting my work, please give this video a like, subscribe, and click the bell to get notified on all my new content.